We spend millions of dollars turning elite soldiers into the ultimate human weapons. But a terrifying manhunt in Tennessee just showed us exactly what happens when government bureaucrats just throw those weapons in the trash.
Yeah, it's a grim reality.
It really is. Welcome to today's deep dive. You are about to hear a story of incredible sacrifice and, honestly, shocking institutional failure.
Right, because we're looking at breaking news reports today, along with specialized medical journals and even first-hand accounts from Special Forces veterans.
Exactly. Our mission for this deep dive is to look past the sensational headlines. We want to uncover the hidden crisis that is quietly destroying our military families.
And we're just looking at the facts here. The facts show how a broken government healthcare system fails our bravest warriors, forcing them to fight their toughest battles completely alone.
So we really need to start with what just happened today, May 7, 2026. This sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about.
Yeah, a massive manhunt in Tennessee just ended in absolute tragedy. Authorities found the body of Craig Berry.
He was a retired Special Forces medical sergeant, right?
53 years old. He had 4 combat deployments to Iraq, and he had been on the run from the police since April 30th.
Wow.
Yeah, they found him dead in a heavily wooded area from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
And the details of why he was running are just incredibly dark. You look at the arrest warrants and they paint this horrifying picture. Berry severely beat his wife and he tried to strangle her.
It's awful.
She miraculously managed to break free, get out of the house, and get into her car. But as she drove away, Berry actually opened fire on her vehicle. He shot her in the neck.
Just terrifying.
Thankfully, she survived. She was just released from the hospital and is recovering. But after he pulled that trigger, Berry vanished into the night.
And you have to understand, when a guy with his specific background vanishes, law enforcement is looking at a nearly impossible situation.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, this is a guy who spent decades as a highly trained Special Forces operator. The police immediately had to warn the public. They told the community, look, Berry is a master survivalist. He's an expert swimmer, a trained diver, and he is heavily armed.
They were preparing to search a massive area, right? The land between the lakes.
Yeah, exactly. It's this huge, unforgiving wilderness area, like 170,000 acres.
And they had heat-detecting planes up in the air, scanning the forest for his thermal signature.
They did, but the cameras missed him entirely. The local sheriff pointed out later that his body temperature had already dropped. They think he took his own life very shortly after he ran.
It's just a devastating end to a horrifying event.
It really is.
But, if we step back and look at the broader timeline, we have to recognize that this isn't just an isolated crime.
No, not at all.
It's part of a deadly escalating pattern. If you connect Craig Berry's death to another breaking news story from just last year, think back to January 2025.
Right, the incident in Las Vegas.
Exactly. Master Start Matthew Livelsberger, an active Green Beret, blew up a Tesla Cybertruck outside President-elect Donald Trump's hotel. And afterward, he took his own life.
And when investigators looked into his background, they found a journal.
What did it say?
Well, it revealed a man who felt completely abandoned by the system he served. He wrote that military leadership had completely shredded its credibility. He felt they failed the soldiers on the ground. And, worst of all, that no one in the bureaucracy was ever held accountable.
It's always the bureaucrats protecting the system, not the individual.
Exactly. He had even planned to detonate his explosives at the Grand Canyon first, before he shifted his target to the hotel.
Okay, let's stop and figure out what is really going on here.
All right.
You might look at these events, one man shooting his wife, another detonating a massive bomb in public, and your brain just says, well, they're violent criminals. Case closed.
Right. It's easy to dismiss them like that.
But when the most elite, highly disciplined warfighters on Earth start snapping and doing these catastrophic things, we have to ask a harder question. What exactly did the military bureaucracy do to break them?
That's the real issue.
If this isn't just a sudden psychological snap, there has to be a physical catalyst. Are we talking about actual mechanical brain damage here?
We absolutely are. Medical researchers who work with Special Forces have finally identified this overarching condition. They call it operator syndrome.
Operator syndrome, okay.
Yeah, and it is intensely physical. It happens when the human body simply breaks down from extreme constant stress. The medical term they use is a massive allostatic load.
Let me try to put that in perspective for you. Think of allostatic load like a thick rubber band.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. You stretch that rubber band tight and you hold it there. It doesn't matter if you never actually snap it. If you hold it under extreme tension for a decade, the material degrades.
Yeah, it dries out.
Exactly. It gets brittle, and eventually it disintegrates just from the constant tension.
That is exactly what is happening to these men, because their operational tempo is just way beyond human limits. A typical operator faces up to 15 combat deployments in just 10 years.
15 deployments.
In a single decade. Yeah. But the craziest part is, the damage doesn't even start in combat.
Wait, really?
Yeah, a 2020 study showed that 85% of Special Forces operators suffer traumatic brain injuries, or TBI. And that 85% statistic, that is from training alone.
Just training. I mean, let that sink in. We aren't even talking about enemy fire yet. We are talking about the explosive charges they use to breach doors on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Exactly. Every single time they're exposed to a blast wave, whether it's an enemy explosive or their own training charges, it physically alters their brain.
How so?
Well, we have to understand the physics of a blast wave. It's not just a loud noise. It is a literal wall of highly pressurized air moving faster than the speed of sound. When that wave hits the human skull, the skull actually compresses.
And the brain inside isn't fixed in place. I mean, it's suspended in fluid. It's basically the consistency of gelatin.
Right. So the blast wave ripples through that gelatinous tissue. The different densities of the brain move at different speeds, and they slide against each other.
Ouch.
Yeah, it causes microscopic tearing all across the brain. Neurologists call this interface astroglial scarring.
Okay, so you have a guy walking around with thousands of microscopic scars on his brain. He looks totally fine on the outside, but his internal wiring is completely shredded.
Exactly.
How does that brain damage cascade into the rest of the body?
It creates a catastrophic failure in the endocrine system.
The hormone system.
Right. The endocrine system is basically the body's master thermostat for hormones. Because the brain is scarred, it stops sending the right signals to the glands. So suddenly, this incredibly fit, tough operator experiences a massive, unnatural drop in testosterone.
Which is super dangerous because a severe drop in testosterone perfectly mimics clinical depression.
Yes, exactly.
You get the severe fatigue, low mood, extreme irritability. And a standard military doctor might just look at them and say, well, you're depressed. Here are some antidepressants.
Happens all the time.
But the reality is their brain mechanically cannot signal their body to produce the right hormones anymore.
And that misdiagnosis leads to the next domino falling, which is sleep, or really the complete loss of it. The hormonal crash wrecks their circadian rhythms.
All right.
Add in the chronic physical pain from years of carrying 100-pound rucksacks and jumping out of airplanes, and they just stop sleeping. They develop severe sleep apnea.
So you have a soldier who is exhausted, in chronic pain, hormonally depleted, misdiagnosed, and literally unable to achieve restful sleep for months or even years.
That's operator syndrome in a nutshell.
I was actually reading an account from a retired Special Forces Sergeant First Class, Greg Walker. He worked for years as a case manager for wounded operators, so he saw this firsthand.
Oh yeah, his stuff is great.
He gave this brilliant analogy. He says the military treats these highly trained heroes like flashlight batteries. The government puts them in the flashlight, turns them on, uses them until they drain completely dry, and then just tosses them into the massive bureaucratic dumpster of the VA.
It's tragic, but it really highlights a deeply ingrained culture of expendability. The system uses them until their physical body gives out, and then they just replace them with the next recruit.
But let me guess, the military command isn't completely blind to this. They know these guys are falling apart. I mean, didn't they start embedding mental health professionals directly into Special Forces units to catch this stuff?
They did, yeah. Around 2005, the military realized they had a massive crisis. So they created behavioral health teams and embedded them right into the special operations units.
Makes sense on paper.
Yeah, on paper, it's a brilliant idea. Let the operators talk to clinicians who have high-level security clearances so the soldiers can speak openly about their classified missions.
But I can deduce the problem here. If you put a doctor inside a military unit, that doctor ultimately answers to the commander of that unit.
Bingo.
And a Special Forces commander gets promoted based on mission readiness, not on how many broken guys they send to rehab.
You hit the exact nerve of the issue. Military commanders prioritize mission metrics and deployability over a soldier's long-term health.
Of course they do. It's all about the spreadsheet.
Exactly. A commander has a rigid quota of deployments to fulfill. Imagine you are a doctor embedded in one of these units. You examine a team and realize half the guys are suffering from severe TBI and operator syndrome.
Right.
You tell the commander, look, these men need a year off to heal. But if the commander listens to you, he fails his mission quota.
So the commander manipulates the medical system to keep his numbers up.
Yeah.
When you look at the internal accounts from these units, you see commanders actively pressuring the medical staff to ignore blazing red warning signs.
Oh, all the time.
A guy is drinking heavily to numb the pain. Look the other way. A guy is struggling with severe mood swings. Just swap out his psychiatric medications really fast so he can technically pass his pre-deployment physical.
The official attitude basically became, anything you can do to make sure a guy stays in the fight is okay with us.
And the operators aren't stupid. They instantly realize the doctor works for the commander, not for the patient.
Right, so the trust is completely destroyed. There's a total lack of independent medical oversight. The clinician becomes just another tool for the bureaucracy to maintain its readiness statistics.
The most heartbreaking example of this specific bureaucratic betrayal is the story of staff-sected Mike Mantenuto.
Yeah, that case is so sad.
A lot of people listening might actually recognize his name. Before he joined the Army and became a Green Beret, he was a Hollywood actor. He starred in the 2004 Disney movie Miracle. He played Jack O'Callahan, one of the hockey players who beat the Soviets.
Mantenuto was incredibly charismatic. He was immensely well-liked in his unit. But behind the scenes, he was actively suffering from severe mental health and substance abuse issues.
He was basically a patient himself.
Exactly. Struggling to hold it together under the weight of his own allostatic load.
But instead of grounding him and getting him serious, long-term clinical help, the unit commanders did something totally baffling. They allowed Mantenuto to run a peer support group for other struggling soldiers.
And keep in mind, he had zero formal medical or psychological training.
None at all.
They did it because it served the bureaucracy. If struggling soldiers are sitting in a room just talking to Mike Mantenuto informally, there's no official medical record generated.
So there's no paperwork that prevents those soldiers from deploying.
Exactly. The leadership loved this setup. They actively promoted it. They used his fame and charisma as a loophole to avoid sending guys to real mental health clinicians who might actually take them off the deployment roster.
It was a complete house of cards, and it collapsed in the worst way possible.
Yeah.
In 2017, Mike Mantenuto tragically took his own life in a park.
He was only 35.
Yeah, and when he died, it absolutely devastated the soldiers he was supposed to be canceling. The men he was helping suddenly realized the guy keeping them afloat was drowning the entire time.
Several of those men expressed renewed suicidal thoughts right after his death.
The system literally used a broken man to prop up other broken men, just to keep the deployment spreadsheets looking good.
It is the ultimate manifestation of bureaucratic failure. They abandon the individual warfighter to protect the system. And here is the truly terrifying part. That abandonment doesn't just hurt the soldier. It actively spills over into civilian society.
Starting with the people who sleep in the same house as them.
Exactly.
Which brings us right back to the tragedy we opened with, Craig Berry and his wife. We have to look at how this physical and institutional failure destroys the family unit. Because when the government breaks a man and fails to fix him, it's the spouses and the children who end up bearing the brunt of that violence.
Researchers refer to this as the occupational stress spillover theory.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, think deeply about how we train these men. We immerse them in hypermasculine, incredibly dangerous, chaotic environments. We wire their brains to believe that the only way to survive chaos is to establish absolute, immediate control.
Right.
And the tool they are given to establish that control is extreme physical force. That is their occupational survival mechanism.
And it works perfectly in a war zone. I mean, it keeps them and their teammates alive?
Yes, it is highly adaptive for combat. But when they come home, the military system utterly fails to help them transition out of that mindset. Because of the brain scarring and the hormonal crashes we talked about, their brain is physically locked in a state of hyperarousal.
Their threat detection system just cannot be turned off.
Exactly. So imagine a normal, stressful situation in a civilian living room, an argument over finances, a loud noise in the kitchen, a child screaming. The operator's brain registers a loss of control, and it instantly defaults to the one tool the military ingrained in them: physical force.
The statistics on this spillover effect are just staggering. When you look at intimate partner violence in military populations, the rates range from 13.5% all the way up to an unbelievable 58%.
Over half.
Yeah, over half. You combine the massive strain of 15 deployments with untreated PTSD, physical brain damage from explosive blasts, and, heavy alcohol use to self-medicate, It literally turns traditional homes into combat zones.
The families are trapped living with the ghosts of the battlefield. The operators are dealing with intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. And military spouses often feel they can't call the police during a domestic incident.
Because an arrest would ruin their husband's military career?
Right. It would cut off the family's income and their health care. So it traps them in silence. The pressure on the marriage is absolute. In some special forces units, the divorce rate tops 90%.
90%. That isn't just a tough job. That is a systemic failure of care. When the government bureaucracy refuses to take care of the soldier, they aren't just failing that man, they are actively endangering his wife and his children. They are knowingly sending a ticking time bomb back into a residential neighborhood and just hoping for the best.
And when that bomb finally goes off, whether it's domestic violence like the manhunt for Craig Berry or a literal explosive device like Matthew Livelsberger in Las Vegas, the bureaucracy acts shocked.
Right, they issue press releases about how surprising and tragic it is.
But the reality of operator syndrome tells us this is a highly predictable outcome. The physical destruction of their brains and bodies, combined with the self-serving chain of command that hides the damage, creates an inevitable, deadly cycle.
Our veterans and their families deserve actual accountability. They need independent medical doctors, physicians who can ground a soldier for healing without any fear of a unit commander overriding their medical authority.
Absolutely.
They need a system that values a human life over a deployment metric. They deserve real healing, not just another layer of bureaucratic red tape.
Because right now, the whole system is perfectly designed to look away until it's far too late.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. A completely different angle on everything we've just discussed today. We started by talking about how the government spends millions turning these men into ultimate human weapons.
Right.
But we just spent the last 15 minutes proving that the human brain and the endocrine system physically cannot withstand the physics of modern warfare. The concussive blasts literally tear our biology apart.
It's true.
If operator syndrome is an unavoidable physical reality, are we reaching the biological limit of the human soldier? If flesh and blood cannot survive the training required to fight the wars of tomorrow without turning into scar tissue, what happens next?
That's a great question.
Are we pushing toward a future where the elite human operator is entirely replaced by unmanned drones and AI, simply because the human body is no longer capable of surviving the physics of our own weapons? It's definitely something to think about.